morning, everybody. Welcome to this session. I'm going to go straight ahead and introduce Gino van Begin from ICLEI, who will make the opening remarks. And then we will have a presentation from also from ICLEI, from Esther, and then I from UNCDF will moderate the discussion. But this is a very, very important session, possibly the most important at COP, because so you're in a lucky place, because we're going to be discussing a way of having a city-friendly investment pipeline. Everybody talks about bringing the private sector in, projects, bankable projects, but on the terms of whom? They have to be on the terms that works for the city, for what the city wants to achieve. And that's what UNCDF and ICLEI together can bring with this Cities Bridge facility. Gino, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. I would like, first of all, to extend a very warm welcome to everyone here to join us for the launch of this very first UNCDF ICLEI City Bridge facility at this pavilion here. First of all, let me express my gratitude to UNCDF for the collaboration and the contribution to this pavilion, as well as to our joint efforts here at COP28. UNCDF and ICLEI have maintained a long partnership over a number of years now, and collaborating and promoting together sustainable urban development. As you know, ICLEI is a global network of around 2,500 cities, towns, and regions globally in about 125 countries, working together towards increasing sustainable urban development in those jurisdictions. And as you very well know, the global urban population is expected to double within the next 25 years, and the frequency of the catastrophe that we have seen that are coming forward due to climate change, those hazards will rise and therefore have even more impact on cities and urban areas in the future. And therefore, it is absolutely necessary that cities, local governments, regional governments weapon themselves better to tackle and to envisage and to anticipate, where possible, prevent also risks that come forward through this. For all of that, we are very happy that with this new City Bridge facility that we are launching here, we can hopefully contribute to investment, to funding the projects that these cities will put forward in the next years. Here at COP28, for ICLEI as well as UNCDF, we have and are calling upon the parties, the MDBs, and the regional development banks to close, first of all, the financing gap that is in the meanwhile more than $1 trillion annually, and that gap is actually growing. So it's a massive amount of funding that is required to actually equip the urban world in the attention of climate change impacts. We are here also to ask the parties and the MDBs to ensure direct access for subnational government to the operation of the various funds and funding mechanisms. And thirdly, we are particularly encouraged by the fact that the decision on the loss and damage fund that was taken on the 1st of December, now in its operations, foresee already direct access for subnational government. We as the LGMA, as a constituency, as a focal point for subnational government here at the UNFCCC, have been working very hard in the last months to actually ensure that this direct access in the loss and damage fund for subnationals is ensured. So it is in the frame also of the COP here, the UNFCCC, we ask the parties in particular to help coming forward with national climate policies that focus and enable institutional frameworks that can bridge the subnational development finance gap through a multitude of multi-level partnerships, capacity building, and customized financing instruments. So it is in that frame that we are so excited about the Bridge for Cities facility that is going to be launched here today. And you will hear from my colleague more in that in a moment. But essentially, I would like to say that the City Bridge facility will allow national government, national leaders to engage with their subnational leaders to work together, and in doing so, enhancing the sustainability financing that to become far more accessible and to jointly work on those issues. ICLEI, as part of the City Bridge facility, will provide the technical support, the capacity building to accompany subnational governments in the applications and in the instrumentalization of these projects and ideas. So the City Bridge facility has this a component of really being a project preparation facility as well, but we hope that it's going to be more, and that it will be leading to an investment facility that can support, in particularly, secondary cities in the least developed countries. The Cities Bridge facility will complement a number of other existing instruments already, like the GAP Fund, our own Transformative Actions Program, the TAP, the CCFLA, which is the Leadership for Urban Climate Investment initiatives, for example. And we will try to work with all of these partners here together. So in conclusion, and also as a member of the SDSN Global Commission on SDG Urban Financing under the leadership of Professor Jeffrey Sachs, which was launched in June this year, we committed as ICLEI to ensure that the local voices are being brought into the financial discussions. And therefore, I'm so pleased that today, with our colleagues from UNCDF, we can come forward here and present to you the UNCDF ICLEI City Bridge facility. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gino. And to me, it actually makes sense, and it closes the circle that ICLEI and UNCDF are working on this, because I think the first time we came together was at the very first Resilient Cities Conference in Bonn in 2010. And I remember sitting down with other people from ICLEI talking about how nice it would be if there was a city-friendly investment track. And 10 years later, we're starting to put the pieces together. The guarantee facility is coming. There are various other alternatives financing, and we can now make this happen for the green transition. So I think those Resilient Cities conferences, those early ones, a lot of what we're seeing now, I think the seeds were planted at those events. And I'm going to now request Esther Mogilski to make the keynote presentation. And then I'll call the speakers to sit and join on, and we will have an interactive discussion. So Esther, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So I will give you a short presentation on what is exactly this City Bridge facility, which we've been working on already since years, and how the idea was born. So I'm just trying to turn a bit the mic that I see better the slides. So we can, I believe, go to the next. So basically, both UNCDF and ICLEI working closely together with local and regional governments, supporting them with their project preparation and then access finance for their infrastructure investment projects. We were facing similar challenges, and some challenges were systematically coming back. So we noticed that there is a very limited fiscal and technical capacity of the local governments to develop investment-ready projects and then to access finance. We also saw that the investors, the financiers, they favorize the large-scale projects and the megacities. They really left behind the secondary cities, and the small-scale projects are not their interest. But we also noticed that the financial institutions, meanwhile, are looking for transformative projects that are financeable, but they really have a mega shortage of that. And what we also noticed that the recent financing instruments are not city-friendly at all. So building on those challenges, our objective was to create something, the City Bridge Facility, which would primarily focus on the secondary cities located in the least developed countries, and that we help to develop sustainable investment-ready projects, but then after helping their preparation, also helping them to access customized financing, city-friendly financing instruments. So our approach is that we don't want to do something which overlaps with already ongoing initiatives or funds or financing mechanism being out there. So we really would like to collaborate with all initiatives already existing. So here we didn't list, obviously, all the initiatives that are out there, and Gino also mentioned. So just I would like to also speak about shortly about the ICLEI-led Transformative Actions Program and the TAP, which is a project preparation facility accompanying projects from the very early stage until the implementation, supporting them with their project preparation. And then here, what we just wanted to showcase, but as I said, there are way more many initiatives, particularly the CCFLA Lucy initiatives. We really would like to collaborate with closely together. So for example, the GAP Fund, which is for a very early stage project preparation facility managed by the European Investment Bank and the World Bank. This is where we see a very close connection, and we would like to really build it, that after the projects get this very early stage technical assistance, we would then take in our City Bridge facility those projects over and then provide them technical assistance, reimbursable grants, concessional loans, guarantee. And then based on the level of the maturity of the project, then these projects could either be supported by the International Municipal Investment Fund, the IMIF, which is managed by UNCDF, and it's a project preparation facility for more mature projects, but also providing equity financing. Or the projects could then be further supported through the City Guarantee Facility, the EFSD Plus, which is an EU guarantee facility. Or we would look for additional external partners like international and national financing institutions, private investors, and commercial banks. Regarding the eligibility criteria, obviously, we would like to support primarily local governments. So our main clients are the sub-sovereign governments, but we would also allow utilities, non-governmental organizations, private sector companies to send their applications, of course, with the condition that we know that they collaborate closely with a sub-sovereign government. Our geographic area would cover particularly the secondary cities in the least developed countries. But I think it's very important to emphasize that we would like to work and provide all these financing instruments using local currency. Our investment threshold is slightly already smaller than the average, which is taken up by the financing institutions, meaning that we would already consider supporting projects starting from $500,000, and we put a max amount, which is not a max, it's an approximate max amount, which we set around $30 million. And then our sectors, we would really like to focus on infrastructure projects. The workflow, very simplified here. So obviously it starts with project origination. So the projects will be submitted through an online portal. Then we will have a joint steering committee that will decide how to proceed, what is the next step of the project. Of course, it depends on the maturity of the project application. And then the step 2 is a tailored project preparation support. So this is a technical assistant package offered by ICLEI and also by UNCDF, For the project preparation support, we will follow the UNCDF dual key processes. And then step 3, when the projects are ready, then of course to help them to access customized financial instruments provided by the facility. And finally, regarding the funding and the duration, so I think it's very important to emphasize that this will be one application process. And through one application process, projects will be able to access the project preparation support and then also accessing finance. At the moment, today we are launching the facility. So at the moment, we plan at least with 5 years. Of course, hopefully it will go way longer than 5 years. But our first target is to help 50 demonstration projects within this 5-year period, but then leveraging it 10 times more. So with that, I would like to thank your attention, and we continue with a panel discussion. Thank you.
And maybe please go back to the previous presentation, if that's okay. And I'd like to invite the panelists. First, His Excellency Lamine Diba, the permanent representative of the Gambia to the United Nations, please. So, and I'm very sorry to say that Ms. Carmen Vogt, who's head of section of cities at GIZ, she let me know this morning that she has a sore throat. And so she's here in spirit. So we'll leave that chair for her there at the end. So, and then we're also very delighted to have Natalie Diaz, who is the Managing Director of Capital Markets and Sustainable Finance at the Brazilian Development Bank. And from the European Union, Lars Gronveld, head of section, also sends his apologies. I don't know if anybody else is representing Lars. Nope. So thank you. So finally, we have Jaime de Aguinaga Gracia, the Vice Provost for Strategy and Development at IE University. Thank you. So I'd like to, but so we're not going to show slides in the discussion. We're just going to have a conversation about what this means, how important it is. So I'd like to maybe go back through the presentation and come at it from a slightly different angle. So if you could fast forward to the one which has the process. So I think what makes this different, I mean, you may be thinking, well, I've seen so many of these project preparation facilities. So what makes this different? I think 3 things makes the Cities Bridge different from anything else you've seen before. Firstly, even with regard to the GAP Fund and others that you may be aware of, the Cities Bridge, it's a city-friendly pipeline process. So the starting point is not the requirements of any particular financier. The starting point is what it is that the city would like to achieve. That is the starting point of the Cities Bridge approach. So I think that's a very important difference. And as Gino mentioned, the SDSN Commission, we're looking for it to kind of change the way that the system works. You hear a lot of talk about, well, there are all these finances out there. We just need more bankable projects. Bankable projects on whose terms? Of course, on the terms of each individual bank. So you can't expect a mayor, particularly in some of the least developed countries, to run around trying to organize things for this bank or for that bank. How are they going to get that information? Even when they apply for one of those facilities, including the GAP Fund and others, maybe what they want to achieve is not best met through that objective, through those criteria. So that's the first thing that makes it different. That it's, I think the second thing that makes it different, in addition to being city friendly, it also has direct access to a variety of financial institutions that already exist. So you can be fast tracked to these through this process. I think that's the second thing that makes it different. And I'll come on to that in a moment. And the third thing that makes it different is that it is an instrument of the city's movement. ICLEI is a key part of it. ICLEI is holding the LGMA representational seats at this process here. We've heard about the Loss and Damage Fund and other work that is done, and ICLEI, together with UCLG and UN Habitat, really drive the city's movement in this climate green transition priority, this imperative that we face in the world. So we felt it was very important that an institution like ICLEI joins forces with us to bring this together. So how will it work in practice? I'm going to give you two concrete examples. I did have the photographs of one of them, but it's just a photograph of some pipes. So I think we're probably better to stick on this. So two concrete examples. So one example, Cities Bridge, by the way, is already up and running in a kind of junior form. It's probably about a 3-year-old right now. So we've got to get it to its full-grown status, but it is up and running. The process is working, and I'm going to give you two examples. One example is the city of Chefchaouen in Morocco that applied to this pipeline process to replace their diesel-powered street lighting, their dirty street lighting, with solar powered street lighting. Now, they applied actually thinking that they were going to be financed through the International Municipal Investment Fund. But in the application process, it became apparent that what they wanted to do did not fit the criteria of that equity fund. But as UNCDF, we can give grants, reimbursable grants, concessional loans, guarantees, and we have a fully fledged global team of investment officers. We didn't say, actually, this application fails because it doesn't meet the standards of the International Municipal Investment Fund. We said, let's find another way to make it financeable. And for us, the key is the word financeable. You know, that may be bankable. It may be bankable only through blended. It may need a guarantee. It may need a public investment. And where can we get that public investment from? And then the public investment will be repaid through greater fiscal receipts. So how can we get it financed? So in this case, the solution we came up with was a 0 interest rate loan to the city. The city has taken this loan. It's already borrowed. It's borrowed about $1 million. And under Moroccan legislation, normally a city cannot borrow. But that wasn't a problem because we found a way around it. Also under Moroccan legislation, a city has to repay its energy bills, has to basically pay its energy bills, its water and its utility bills before it even pays its staff. So if you put the repayment of the 0 interest rate loan in the same budget line that you use for utility bills, and if the infrastructure investment saves the utility bill because the solar street lighting will actually provide many savings, then they will repay the loan with the savings without increasing their net outgoings until the loan has been repaid. Then they will benefit from the savings. So it's financeable in an innovative way. And this is happening. This is going. The mayor of Chefchaouen will tell you about this transaction. It is taking place right now. So that was it. Why can't we do this more? And then another example came up shortly afterwards, which is the Tanga water bond. So here again, we were working with a city who was trying to apply for one of these pipelines, maybe World Bank GAP fund, but it turned out that that was not really going to work for this option. And they approached some international investors, but because of the currency exchange rate risks, that was going to be too high. So in conversations with the Ministry of Finance, said, let's try a domestic capital market bond in Tanzanian shillings. And this is now going to go to market. And at this COP, I had the pleasure of conversing with the president of Tanzania about it. And the Minister of Finance has put this initiative in the budget speech of Tanzania. It's a priority for the country, and it will create a local government municipal bond market. It'll be a $23 million bond, and it will finance drinking water to the city of Tanga that has not yet had the pleasure of turning on a tap and getting drinking water out of that tap. They will now get that. So that again, $23 million, a domestic currency bond. The first one, a reimbursable 0 rate loan. They can both be scaled up. For the Tanzania, the scale up will be more similar transactions once that model is established. And we're looking at Mwanza, Arusha, other cities in Tanzania. And then that will then take off. In the case of Morocco, the scale up will be through the FEC, the Fonds d'Équipement Communal, which is a Moroccan development bank owned by the government, and they will create a revolving fund to do this with many more cities. So that's what I think we're trying to achieve with this cities bridge here. We would like to bring forward 50 of these demonstration transactions that will then go to scale in different ways. And that's what I'd like to discuss with the panelists. So we have a very diverse set of panelists here, but they all have I think, have a very interesting angle to bring to the problem we're trying to solve here. So firstly, I'd like to ask His Excellency Lamine Diba a question. So I know right now you are the permanent representative of the United Nations of Gambia to the United Nations, but we actually requested you to join the panel also because of your previous experience as Minister of Environment in the Gambia. And I know that you're passionate about urban development, and you're very well aware of the urbanization of Africa's cities. Africa is becoming an urban place, a kind of peri-urban place. And how we can finance the infrastructure of these urban and peri-urban localities, I think, is a real challenge. So the question I want to ask you, Ambassador, is from what you've heard, do you see ways in which this Cities Bridge facility could help local governments and also the central government in Gambia working through your own legislative process to be able to address some of the development challenges you face? Over to you.
Thank you. It's working. Thank you very much, David. And I thank all of you for making time to this very important. I am one who believes that working towards development, you must have the building blocks. And the building blocks to national development cannot happen without local economic development. And cities and urban centers play an important role in achieving that national economic growth and development. But in Africa, for instance, and least developed countries in general, we are challenged. Even national governments are challenged to breach the financing gap of development needs, particularly relating to SDGs. Now, what I have seen here, for me, I call it a game changer. Changing the game of accessing resources by cities and by urban authorities. It is important for them to have it because within the city and urban areas, you have a lot of development challenges that are happening at the same time, compounded by climate and climate variability. How do cities achieve urban resilient infrastructure? These are huge investments that goes beyond the capacity of cities. Now, if we have a facility like this, that comes to kind of the economies will go pushing that effect, that gap, to make them access and invest in those sectors that can in turn produce to growth and development that would be something that cities can achieve. The other interesting thing that I am very much particular about is regional and even within a country, variability and capacities of different councils and cities. Different councils and cities are at different levels of development. Now, for you to have a model that is tailored, which I like about this model, which is tailored towards the needs and aspirations of that city. There, you can do a SWOT analysis to see what are the strengths and weaknesses of this council and be able to tailor the program and the investment areas that they need to grow, which is very essential. Now, within countries, you have urban growth centers, you have cities. And these are at different levels, and they have different access to resources in terms of domestic revenue that they are able to collect, but also the capacity to be able to develop bankable proposals. We all know sometimes it may be bankable, sometimes it may not be bankable, because we have to do a lot of social development. So how do we attract investors to help support councils to be able to address those needs and aspirations of city dwellers? And I believe what is just presented here and what David just talked about, this can be a mechanism that can help to achieve those and bridge the gap and enable cities to achieve sustainable development goals in all the 17 goal areas. And the other thing that you talked about is partnership. I believe councils and local governments need partners not only at the national level. For instance, in the Gambia, the 2002 Local Government Act provides for what equalization grant. But now in applying the equalization grant to councils, how do you apply them? Because already you have this, they are at different levels. If you want to say every year central government will give $1 million to each council, already you are disadvantaging some councils. So now based on the capacity and the resources that they have, you'll be able to, government will be able to tell them, this is what we're going to support you. But equally, you can scale this to IFIs, MDBs. Somebody talked about this, which the debate is very hot at the United Nations. How do least developed countries achieve sustainable development goals and also their needs for climate and climate resilience? The current trajectory and the current setup at the IFIs and the MDBs would not allow that to happen because already we are in what we call debt trap. The resources that you collect at the local level, at the domestic level, you pay it as loans, financing your loans. Without the reform of the financial architecture, international financial architecture, it would be difficult for us to be able to achieve that. And I know participation of citizens starts with councils and cities. Your voice is very important in reoccurring that call for reforms in the MDBs and the IFIs to enable people to access resources unfettered and be able to invest in the social and also in the productive sector to allow economic growth and development. I'll stop here for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Really inspiring remarks, Ambassador. And I think to move the debate along, I'm going to come to Natalie next. And if you could move the slide down, please, to the one where you had those arrows, where the gap fund was showed. That's the one. That's the one. So here, I'd like to address this issue of partnership and request one of our partners from the Brazilian National Development Bank. And this is an approach that we hope to take to Brazil in the conversations we're also talking about. So it's very relevant. And I'd like to look at the partnerships and how it fits in. Now, and also relate to a little bit to what the ambassadors just said. So you see there, it says GAP Fund. This is one example of an existing arrangement which has a particular set of financing criteria. So the GAP Fund will result in something to be financed through a World Bank loan or a European Investment Bank loan, probably to the country itself. So when you look at the GAP Fund reports, there are many projects that don't make it because they were not able to be blended into a World Bank or EIB financing package for whatever reason. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not valid, as I mentioned earlier. And the report is full of projects that didn't make it. And that you can group those by themes: waste to energy, street lighting, solar lighting, as I've mentioned, water, as I've mentioned. So we have a capacity now at UNCDF to work across these themes and to look at other solutions that might be relevant. So that's what we hope. That's why we put the GAP Fund there, because we're talking with we're partnering with the people who are working on the GAP Fund, EIB in particular, to see how we can liaise with them to pick up some of the investments that they're not able to take forwards. And then you see here Cities Bridge Facility. So you see the mention of the City Guarantee Facility, EFSD Plus. So with the European Union, and it will be announced here at COP on the 8th of December, they have already allocated 154 million euros for a city guarantee facility that will guarantee city-led projects. And it will do this through working with domestic banks, and national development banks. And that's why I'm going to come to you next, because we actually spoke with them quite specifically. We would like the City Guarantee Facility to help national development banks find ways of financing cities in developing countries. Because the idea of a city borrowing on the global capital market in hard currency is almost impossible. Where we talk about it all the time, but it's not really going to happen. Even in relatively wealthy countries like the one I'm from, that's already been, they used to do it when I was growing up. They can't do it anymore for various reasons. So let's not pretend that these cities are going to be able to borrow in hard currency on international markets. And let's find an alternative. And that's what we hope the Cities Bridge Facility can be. Yes, there will be some sovereign borrowing through the national governments, but they're pretty much maxed out. So through this City Guarantee Facility, through picking up off the GAP Fund, through the International Municipal Investment Fund. So let me mention this one. This one is actually managed by Meridian in Paris. We work on the pipeline. We offer the pipeline to that fund, and that's an equity fund. So that will not lend you any money. What it will do is it will own part of your public transport system. And we find this works very well for public transport. There are already projects coming out of this for public transports, also for coastal protection in certain places. So another least developed country, Mauritania, Nouakchott, the capital, is talking with the International Municipal Investment Fund about an investment along the coastline, which will protect 20 kilometers of coastline from the erosion, maintain the mangroves with no debt. How? Because of course there'll be a real estate in development there at one place, and Meridian will own that real estate development. But that will only be half a kilometer long. The rest of the 20 kilometers the city gets for free, and there is no debt to the city. So some cities will do that, some cities will not. On public transport, the way it works is the International Municipal Investment Fund will own the revenue from your bus system or your tram system, let's say for the next 30 years. A portion of it, maybe 50% of the revenue of your local transport system will go to them for 30 years. That's how they make the investment, but there's no debt. So yes and no, it depends. That's what we will be doing with the Cities Bridge Facility. Like, what works and how can we make it work for you? And I think it is a city-friendly investment fund. So now coming to the Brazilian National Development Bank, we're trying to bring this approach as well, of course, to work with you. And this would mean cities and small towns in Brazil, in the northeast region of Brazil, the poorer region of Brazil, being able to access these kind of approaches, and including the guarantee facility, to develop slightly different ways of financing their projects in partnership potentially with the National Development Bank. Are you ready for this? Because it's different than what you've been doing before.
Yes. Well, thank you, David. First of all, thanks UNCDF for the invitation, and thanks for all of you that have taken the time to see us here today. Well, I think, first of all, my initial reaction to the city's investment facility is that it is really a great initiative, because in the way I see it, it is tackling perhaps 4 challenges that we have in financing projects in emerging economies and in least developed countries. First of all, we all know that one of the reasons why we have been lagging on the implementation of the SDGs is because in the beginning it was very at the macro level. So just developing something that applies to the territory, that goes really where life is, where most of the challenges are, is really important. And we know all the efforts that the United Nations has been doing in SDG localization. So this is very, very good. Then secondly, we see that for most of the time, the issue that you are providing the facility in local currency is potentially the most important feature that we have here, because we know all the challenges that we have in hedging for FX, and Brazil launched here at COP together with the IDB, when hedging mechanisms for the projects that we are implementing in Brazil, but it's a very, very important move. But it is definitely one of the greatest challenges that we have. Then thirdly, even for a bank, as BNDES, we are a public national bank, sometimes we have in emerging economies such big structural problems that is very hard for us to focus on the very, very small municipalities, right? So we tend to structure and to focus on larger projects that can create a greater impact to the country. So I'm talking about big infrastructure, railway, roads, sanitation at federal level. And so it's really important to have someone that has this capacity to structure and to build a pipeline of trusted projects that then we can come up with the financing. So I think everything seems to be very, very, very good. And what I think that we need to do, and it's probably because financing or bridging this financing gap, it's definitely something that we can work together with you. And the way, and in this portion, I mean, it's not only the gap, we will need to rethink how we can tap these funds from either the European Bank or the World Bank, and rethink the way that they lend to public development banks. Because as we know, we know how to structure the project, we know how to measure externalities. But the issue that we are still being measured by the credit ratings in the international system that is not fair, that does not take into consideration all the aspects that we have, does not factor in, for instance, ESG factors. BNDES has a Basel ratio of 34%, a delinquency ratio of 0.01%, and I get a 4-notch downgrade on the sovereign just because I'm based in Brazil. So I think when we design this financing gap, we need to think, do we really need a sovereign guarantee? BNDES has never defaulted in these 75 years of history. So how can we kind of raise funding based on the financial strength of the bank so that we can actually plug into the efforts that you guys are having? So I think if we can come up with something that is really smart in that way, this is going to be super effective.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You came up with a very interesting point there. Oh. Apologies, I was so inspired by what you said about the guarantee. You made a very good point there, the sovereign guarantee. So that's one of the blockages right now. You know, I remember at the World Water Week in Dakar, speaking with the people from the finance ministry in Gambia. They said, well, very good, but you know, you're not going to get that through because of the guarantee. And of course, any local borrowing, in fact, debt or liability on a water utility, a power utility, any local government, a regional government, anywhere in a country is counted by the IMF as part of the national balance sheet. So it's rather like any borrowing by your children is counted as part of your own as an adult, you're as a parent, I mean, your own borrowing. So the credit cards are maxed out of these national governments. And there has to be a way around that, because actually on paper, sometimes these entities are more creditworthy than the government itself. And we carried out this study in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh has issues in terms of its sovereign debt. But if you look at a city in Bangladesh, you know, Bangladesh is I think it's now the 4th largest country in the world in terms of population. It has many cities with 1 million and more people. The population is growing. The land values are increasing. The revenue to the city is increasing. The economy is growing. These places have zero debt, and they also have zero public transport. Now, you go to other parts of the world, you only need to have 300,000-400,000 people, and there's already a tramway system there. You go to Bangladesh, 1 million people, and it's chaos trying to move around. So if that entity has that economic potential and zero debt, surely it must be possible to, in a responsible way, create a financial package for them to make some investments. Currently not, because anything they do, the Minister of Finance will say no, because this actually adds to our borrowing limit. So that's what we need to overcome. And that's what this city guarantee facility will help with, because that will provide an alternative guarantee. That's what the IMIF helps, because that's an equity investment. There's no borrowing. And also the other issues that we've been discussing in Tanzania, it's not up there, this domestic capital market bonds, because there it's actually on the domestic capital market. So it doesn't actually affect your borrowing at the sovereign level in the same way. And there's no currency element. And there are other ways too. And that's what we need to explore, I think, through this facility. We heard yesterday, Gino and I were at the SDSN Commission, only 6% of investment is in local currency. 6% across the of these city projects. So, and that's because most of the city projects, of course, in the developed countries, and very few that are in the developing world are able to access these kind of money. So this is the paradigm shift that we will seek to change. And I'm now going to give the floor to Jaime. And you used to be, and again, we invited you here partly in your capacity as an ex-resident representative of UNDP in various countries around the world. And you're well aware of the issues of urbanization and the development challenges that is faced. And as you know, there is now a move to try to move from so-called funding to financing. And I'm a bit uncomfortable with that if it means just a pipeline of bankable projects, because as we know, a bankable project is a Holiday Inn or something like that. It's not necessarily the kind of investment that we need to make to transform our cities. So drawing from your experience in various countries as a resident representative, if this was part of the UNDP toolbox, as Cities Bridge will be, it'll be part of our common toolbox that we can work with when we're developing a strategy for a country. How would it have affected the way that you think if it was part of your toolbox in your hand, given that UNDP and UNCF are joined at the hip? Over to you.
Okay, thank you guys, David, for the question and for the kind invitation to participate in this panel. It's true that I represented UNDP for many years. Now I'm representing an international university, and I would like to merge those two perspectives, no? Because I mean, I think that this facility could play a critical role to mobilize resources for cities, but it's also important to consider that there are three underlying challenges that should be addressed, no? The first one is something that you mentioned already, no? That at the end of the day, you had to put together different entities that are speaking very different languages. You are talking about investors, you are talking about municipalities. And one of the critical challenges is that they don't speak the same language. We are talking about bankable projects, or we are talking about priorities of municipalities, right? So that is a critical gap. And it is one of the bridges that it should be built. The second one is that urban environments, by definition, are very complex systems. We are talking about a huge complexity in social, economic, and political levels, right? So you need a lot of information, a lot of data to really see where are the opportunities, because we are talking about hundreds or thousands of cities. And then when you talk to investors, you have to have a very deep understanding of where are the opportunities, not only the priorities of the cities, but also the opportunities and how you can handle that level of complexity and information. The third dimension that is also critical is something that you mentioned, no? The capabilities, no? And you mentioned also that different cities have different capacities, and also it's one of the key areas of the project, no? So how you build that human factor, no? To ensure not only that you address the problem, but also that you empower those ones to then continue to have sustainability on that. I worked for many years in UNDP, and then I moved to academia, right? And universities were created to address those three things, right? Universities, the word university comes from universe, because originally it was the place in which you mix people of different animals for them to understand each other, right? So we can help mobilize that ecosystem of different partners, right? We work a lot with financial institutions, we work with municipalities, we work with, I mean, in my particular university, we work with around 25 UN agencies, right? And we try to connect those different languages to ensure that there is a common understanding. The second element that I mentioned, the complexity of cities. I mean, universities were also born to generate knowledge, to focus on evidence, to create knowledge, to now handle huge amounts of data with artificial intelligence and with different methodologies to ensure that we can identify where are the opportunities. No? And I think that that could also be a contribution of academic institutions. And the third element is capacity building. No? How we are able to build those capacities, ensuring that that human factor is part of the equation. No? And we don't need to reinvent ourselves. Those are the three things that academic institutions do. So I think that it's also important when we talk about genuine partnership and multi-stakeholder conversations. I mean, also think about unusual partners that could also help to solve that equation.
I think that's a very important point. And a lot of data is actually already existing in local universities, there's a lot of local studies are already there, and they're not really taken advantage of when one is designing these projects. So I think it's a very important angle, and we will certainly bring that into the thinking in this process. So I'm very happy with these contributions. Thank you very much, everybody. And I think we have time for questions, which is the really rare at a lot of these COP events. So thank you for being so concise. Any questions or comments that anybody would like to make? The floor is open. Or is everybody completely happy with what they've heard? Please.
Well, thank you very much. I want to really like to thank ICLEI for have managed to work through and come up with a product, because over the years, we have been arguing about exactly what this project is tackling. First of all, it's like a lack of knowledge, because there is an asymmetry of information. For example, different cities in the global south, they don't know where resources are, even if the resources are available. The ability of gathering information about where to go to get those resources is something of a paramount importance. The second issue that we've been always arguing is the lack, as you very well mentioned, the lack of capacity, not only to gather that information, but to design bankable projects. I mean, most of our cities don't even know where to start from. So the fact that this facility will deal with that issue about capacity building and identifying those most in need, I think it brings an added value. But the third is what the last speaker mentioned, is that most of the times we feel, I did not introduce myself. I'm a mayor of Quelimane City in Mozambique. Most of the times we know what our priorities are, and we feel that the way banks look at our assets is quite biased, because they look at from the credit side, but they don't take and they don't value the assets that cities do have in the same way we think they should. So like, it's like an asymmetric way of looking at the same issue. It's like they look from probably the profit side of it and the risk of it, while we look at the same problem, but coming from the needs perspective. So there is a gap here. So if this project can help, and the university, as the last speaker mentioned, to take us to the same table, because we're not speaking at the same table. Those are from the banking sector. They are like the elephant tower there, looking down on us, like we are the ones who need. So we need to go there and like almost kneel to them. I think we need to change that game. No, we are partners. If an extreme event comes to a city, I think the banks also suffer. The funding institutions, they will also suffer. So it's in their own interest to have more resilient institutions starting from the cities where they are based. So I think that this is really a move forward. So congratulations for both institutions that are working to it. Of course, we need to make it work, because most of the time we create institutions and they don't deliver. We need a monitoring mechanism, and we need also like to have how will I put it? Like you mentioned here 50 projects. I mean, let's have a monitoring mechanism to make sure that when this period ends, we have at least those 50 working, so on. And let's make it inclusive. Most of the time, I'm here, I know about it, but other mayors they're not here. So the issue of asymmetric access to information, I think it's very important. We need to make sure that we are inclusive and information is shared for those most in need. And because unfortunately, those most in need don't have access to information, and the ones with least capacity, we need to try to bring them on board to make it meaningful and to have the impact we expect. So congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honourable Mayor. I really appreciate that input. And I think perhaps we can use this as a kind of case study, given the fact that your position. So were you to apply to Cities Bridge, and it would be nice if one of the 50 could be from Kilimani, what would happen is you would not be talking to a bank anymore. We would, if you look here, you would come in here at this point here, and then we would be helping you to structure what it is you want to do so that it meets one of these different funding criteria, depending on what is your objectives. And that is what would be different about this. So we're not going to start off by saying, right, 5% interest rate, 20-year maturity, this is what you need to do to hit that target. Now, we also know that every country is very, very different. In Morocco, the city was not legally allowed to borrow, but we found a way around it. In Tanzania, they were not able to raise the capital on the global markets, but they really wanted this model of water because they knew that it was financeable. It could repay for itself, but not on the terms of international capital. And it turned out that, hopefully, fingers crossed, this domestic capital market bond will do it. Now, in the case of Mozambique, we would need to see what is the most appropriate way within the legal framework of your country for Kilimani to have an investment that meets your objectives. Given that, I do not actually know Kilimani quite well. It's also growing very rapidly. It has a large peri-urban area. Its receipts are growing. Its population is growing. Its land values are growing. So nominally, Kilimani is in a strong position. I used to live in Nampula. I lived in Nampula for 10 years. So I used to pass through Kilimani all the time. So those places on paper are going concerns with zero debt. Now, the problem is also when you come to some financial entities, they say, oh, make a PPP, privatize it, and give us a concession to do whatever we want in that space. That also doesn't always work. If it's a PPP, it has to be a city-friendly PPP. So I think a PPP is another option to be listed here. So this is what we would work with you on. So maybe it would be nice, we can invite Kilimani to put 2 or 3 of your most favorite, your top priority things into this process. Esther is here, ICLEI is here. They will receive them, and we will start working with you. Let's get going. Thank you.
If you have difficulty in speaking in English, I can use the Brazilian who is here.
Eu também, eu falo por ele, vivi em Nampula, falo português, conheço muito bem a sua cidade. Tá bem. Any other comments or questions? We still have a little bit of time. Are there any other mayors or representatives of local governments here? Who are you a mayor? Are you? Oh, you. So you're from which city? Oh, Kampala. So what do you think? I mean, Kampala is a big KACC. You have this large kind of management structure. Would this be useful to you?
Thank you so much. My name is Doreen Nyanjura, and I didn't really want to say much because I felt that the mayor here had almost represented Kampala, because yes, we talk about funds. When you look at the issues of financing, you realize, yes, there's that element of the funds being available, but what actually is still lacking is the issue of accessibility. Yes, we are hearing about funds, they're available, but the challenge is accessibility. So I'd really be grateful if on behalf of the people of Kampala, we also join, just like you've invited my friend here from Mozambique. I believe that would really be a very, very great opportunity for the people of Kampala, where we still find challenges accessing finance from the national level. Like the representative from Gambia here said, they don't know how to even divide that money because we have capital cities, we have municipalities, so it gets kind of complicated. But my thinking is, if you have a city like Kampala, where we are talking about high levels of pollution, where we are talking about rural-urban migration, then such cities need to honestly be treated as a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've been involved in the Kampala Ginger Expressway and some of the other investments around there. And I think this can be a way to bring those forwards. I think some of my colleagues have been involved already with you. Any other municipality want to? I think we have 2 minutes left. So please, the floor is yours, and then we will close. Thank you.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay.
I can speak? Okay. So I'm from Lusaka, Zambia, and Lusaka is the capital city. So I mentioned in my earlier plenary that we are like over 3 million people. So there's a lot of urbanization happening in the city. And then obviously we have so many things that we'd like to do in the city. And then like my colleagues have said, challenges of financing. And of course, this has been our cry as local authorities that we need to be supported on our own. But just listening to Madame over there, she also spoke about supporting railway. And I think that is one of the things that I would like my city to have. It's just a commuter rail line to just help us decongest the city. And obviously, as a local authority, we don't have that kind of money. But I want to know if there's a way that you can support us using a PPP arrangement, like you've just spoken, and then how we can also be taken into steps of how we can have a good feasibility study and a bankable project, I should call it actually, a bankable project. But it's unfortunate that you do not support subnational government directly, because that has been our cry as African cities. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So please, again, we leave your details with us. I think we have to close now, and I'm sure many of us have to be at an event that started a minute ago. So, oh yes, let's have a quick picture, and then we will. Thank you so much.